There was a car with George and Seo Joo-Heon in it. George was curious about what Seo Joo-Heon was going to do to Kara. Seo Joo-Heon was just smiling happily because she had made a plan in her head and her hand was seen tapping something on her cell phone. While in the back seat, Yoo Ji-ha and Irene heard that Seo Joo-Heon was talking to Edward about her plan. Confused, Seo Joo-Heon asked them to check the internet. Seo Joo-Heon turned on the radio in the car and the news was heard. The news was about Kara, who had exploited young children in Ghana. As soon as everyone heard the news, everyone became surprised and listened further to the news. Yoo Ji-ha also asked how this news could spread like this. Seo Joo-Heon just smiled happily at hearing it. While in the tomb in Ghana, Seo Joo-Heon began to plan something about Kira's tomb. And after he was able to use his cell phone, he knew that he would be able to use his cell phone to expose what Kira was doing in the tomb so that Kira had to hide it from the eyes of the world. And after Seo Joo-Heon entered the tomb, he saw a lot of children who were kidnapped and forced into labor. Seeing this, Seo Joo-Heon also used his cell phone to expose Kira's crimes. Seo Joo-Heon also took a video inside the tomb. He recorded when the children were forcibly employed inside the tomb and sent the video footage to Edward so that he could use his influence to spread the video on social media. Edward happily accepted Seo Joo-Heon's request to spread the video on social media, and because Edward heard that he could have a chance to destroy Kara, Edward became very cooperative with Seo Joo-Heon. V smiled proudly because he felt that his plan this time ended well. Not only that, George and Irene, who heard Seo Joo-Heon's plan had succeeded, were happy because they could avenge Kara. Seo Joo-Heon also smiled because he had avenged Kara. But right after that, a purple aura was seen outside their car. A notification window appeared in front of Seo Joo-Heon saying that there was a painting threatening them. Seo Joo-Heon also asked George to stop the car, and George, who heard it, immediately stopped the car suddenly. Seo Joo-Heon also asked them all to get out of the car immediately. Yoo Ji-ha and Irene, who had come out, were surprised when they saw the melted car. Slowly, the car was getting melted and sucked into a place. They were all surprised when they saw the car being sucked into a painting. On top of the building, there were some soldiers holding a painting that he used to suck the car. Yoo Ji-ha, who saw the Van Gogh painting that sucked him in, knew a little about the background of the painting. And among the soldiers was seen Kara, who greeted Seo Joo-Heon for doing something to him. Kara became very angry now. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon, who saw Kara angry, mocked him instead. Kara, who heard the mockery that Seo Joo-Heon gave, became even more angry. Seo Joo-Heon was still talking about the bad deeds he exposed from Kara. Kara was so angry now that he told Seo Joo-Heon to be quiet. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard Kara's shouting, continued his conversation calmly. Kara said that he would make Seo Joo-Heon responsible for everything and use Irene's parents as hostages. Kara also threatened Seo Joo-Heon to hand over Irene and the elixir plant if she didn't want to see Irene's parents die in front of her. Irene, who heard that, became worried and approached Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon calmed Irene and asked Kara to carry out her threat now. Kara became angry because Seo Joo-Heon, who easily wanted to see Irene's parents die now. But Kara's anger was only returned with a lopsided smile on her face. Kara also asked her subordinates to remove Irene's parents from the painting, and shortly after that, her subordinates had difficulty removing Irene's parents from the painting. Her subordinates said that Irene's parents had disappeared from the painting, which made Kara surprised to hear it. Kara also blamed Seo Joo-Heon for what happened now. Seo Joo-Heon again just smiled annoyingly, and it managed to make Kara annoyed. After that, there was a splash of purple aura that enveloped Seo Joo-Heon's body. The painting slowly sucked in Seo Joo-Heon and his friends. There their bodies turned into paintings and were increasingly sucked in by the painting. And just before they were sucked in, a gold-colored dome protected them from the power of the painting, making it stop sucking in Seo Joo-Heon and his friends. It made Kara and her subordinates surprised that their relic painting was not working now. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon was happy because his body returned to normal. He also glanced and thanked Irene, who protected them all with her power. Irene became angry now. She also asked Seo Joo-Heon to leave the business here to her and asked Seo Joo-Heon to go save his parents. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw the growing strength of Irene, invited George to go with her. George, who was worried about Irene, did not want to leave Irene just like that, but Seo Joo-Heon convinced him to go now and entrust her to Irene. Irene, who was very angry, said that she would end Kara and her army here with her strength. Meanwhile, Kara, who heard the challenge from Irene, smiled and was willing to fight Irene now. Will Irene succeed against Kara? Will Seo Joo-Heon also succeed in saving Irene's parents? The city sky turned black with several thunderbolts thundering everywhere. Meanwhile, with Irene, who was still angry, she used her power with a large amount and said that she would not forgive Kara. While Kara, who heard Irene's words, smiled, belittling Irene, who challenged her. Kara also created a bow made of her power and prepared to shoot it at Irene, and with confidence Kara released the arrow directly towards Irene. As soon as the arrow shot out, a purple aura surrounded the arrow, showing how powerful and strong the attack that Kara was launching now. The arrow transformed into a bird that flew towards Irene. Meanwhile, Irene, who saw the attack from below, was shocked, and a huge explosion occurred at the place where Irene was standing now. Her subordinate, who saw Kara attacking with such force, asked Kara because before she wanted Irene to live and work for her, but Irene had no choice but to use her power. Just before Kara was about to leave, she heard her subordinates pointing at Irene. There was Irene, who was still standing straight and looking at Kara with her angry gaze. Kara, who saw Irene was fine, became surprised. Irene activated her attack again, and now it was her turn to attack. There was another big explosion that made George, who was driving to his parents' place, now worried about Irene. But Seo Joo-Heon, who believed in Irene, calmed George, who kept worrying about Irene. Seo Joo-Heon said that there was nothing George could do even if he wanted to help Irene. It made George have to swallow his worries because what Seo Joo-Heon said was the truth. Seo Joo-Heon again said that Irene was stronger than Kara now, and after they arrived at the place where Irene's parents were, his subordinates quickly lowered and carried the elixir plant following Seo Joo-Heon. And when Seo Joo-Heon opened the room where Irene's parents were, a foul smell wafted throughout the room. George was shocked to see the condition of his parents now. Seo Joo-Heon also asked Oh Seung-woo to harvest more fruit from the tree. It was seen that Seo Joo-Heon picked some fruit from the tree and quickly squeezed the fruit until it became a liquid that could be inserted through Irene's parents' mouth. As soon as Seo Joo-Heon squeezed the fruit, the effect of the fruit was immediate as a golden glow appeared as the fruit entered the mouth of Irene's parents. A dazzling light shone from their bodies and slowly their skin began to heal and regenerate. Seo Joo-Heon told George to do the same as him and pick more fruit from the elixir plant. Meanwhile, Oh Seung-woo could only watch in awe. Slowly the eyes of Irene's parents began to open and got up from the bed, asking Seo Joo-Heon a few things about her whereabouts. George, who saw his parents back to health, felt very happy now. With his concern, George also waited until his mother was fully awake and conscious. Seo Joo-Heon said that he would return to Irene now and asked George to take care of his own parents. Seo Joo-Heon quickly left the room, but she could still hear George thanking her, and Seo Joo-Heon smiled as George thanked her. Seo Joo-Heon was seen driving his truck back. In his heart, he was still a little worried about Irene because Kara was not a weak opponent for him. A notification window appeared in front of him saying that the relics of Irene and Kara were still attacking each other. Yoo Ji-ha, who got out of his truck, was surprised to see that everything had been destroyed in the area where Irene and Kara fought before. And because the road was damaged, Seo Joo-Heon and Yoo Ji-ha continued their search on foot. The place had been completely destroyed with fires raging everywhere, and the streets that were once clean and tidy had now become chaotic. Yoo Ji-ha, who walked through the area, was a little scared because he saw everything had been destroyed with fires raging everywhere. Seo Joo-Heon also saw something in front of him, a figure of someone who was walking towards them. But both of them could not see it clearly because it was covered by thick smoke. Yoo Ji-ha looked a little scared and horrified by the figure that was getting closer to them, and heard the voice of Irene calling Seo Joo-Heon. Immediately they saw Irene, who survived. Seo Joo-Heon was relieved while Yoo Ji-ha was surprised because Irene came suddenly. Irene also said that Kara disappeared when she was fighting with her. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard that, felt strange because Kara was not the type who would escape while fighting. Besides that, Seo Joo-Heon received a notification window earlier that mentioned that Irene and Kara were fighting. Seo Joo-Heon suddenly thought of something, and she smiled as she began to know what was happening now. Seo Joo-Heon also said that if Kara was experiencing risk right now. Seo Joo-Heon then explained that Kara was a relic user, Sekhmet, the goddess of destruction, but the other form of the goddess of destruction was the goddess of love, Hathor, and because of this, the risk received by Kara was transformation. Seo Joo-Heon again said that if Kara was still in this place, but Kara had transformed into something they could not see now. Seo Joo-Heon smiled wryly with the plan he had made to conquer Kara. After that, Seo Joo-Heon asked them to split up and look for Kara. A worm was seen wriggling on the ground. It turned out that the worm was Kara, who was changing her form. She was annoyed because the risk was very fast and she could not move her body as she wanted. Kara could not see anything and could only hope that Seo Joo-Heon would not find her in this condition. A foot almost stepped on Kara's transformed body. It turned out to be Yoo Ji-ha, who came carrying the Van Gogh relic in his hand. Seo Joo-Heon couldn't stop thinking because just a moment ago Yoo Ji-ha said that this place was scary, but now he was running and carrying the relic. Seo Joo-Heon glanced at Yoo Ji-ha, who was still explaining something to him, and while Yoo Ji-ha was still explaining, Seo Joo-Heon suddenly tore the painting. Yoo Ji-ha, who saw Seo Joo-Heon tearing the painting just like that, became upset and sad because Seo Joo-Heon tore the masterpiece. Seo Joo-Heon then took out his map relic that he had previously transformed into a book, and with the torn painting, Seo Joo-Heon activated the power of the relic to find the owner of the Van Gogh painting relic. And a moment after that, Kara became surprised and frightened when she heard the voice of Seo Joo-Heon, who spoke to her in the form of a worm. Seo Joo-Heon also looked down at Kara, who had turned into a worm. What will Seo Joo-Heon do to Kara now? Seen Seo Joo-Heon still holding Kara in his hand, which made Irene and Yoo Ji-ha a little incredulous that Kara had turned into a worm. Seo Joo-Heon thanked Irene for defeating Kara and making her like this. Seo Joo-Heon also said that he managed to heal Irene's parents. Irene, who heard it, became very happy because her parents had been healed thanks to Seo Joo-Heon. After the battle, New York returned to peace as before and the Holton family held a party at their mansion, but Seo Joo-Heon still had something he had to do with Kara. In the car, Yoo Ji-ha was still making a replica of the Van Gogh relic. Seo Joo-Heon also asked how much the ability of the replicated relic compared to the original to Yoo Ji-ha, but it seemed that Yoo Ji-ha did not know it. Seo Joo-Heon had to weaken the power of Kara. Seo Joo-Heon got out of the car. Now he was standing in a fairly large mansion in front of him. Seo Joo-Heon smiled happily because he got a place that was rarely visited because he was more free with what he would do with the mansion. Seo Joo-Heon and Yoo Ji-ha entered the mansion and they both seemed impressed with the splendor of the mansion. Seo Joo-Heon also told Yoo Ji-ha to find a room and repair the relic. Yoo Ji-ha, with a little unacceptable, obeyed Seo Joo-Heon's request. Then Seo Joo-Heon took out a box and took out the contents of the box, which turned out to be Kara. Seo Joo-Heon intended to punish Kara in her worm form, while Kara, who heard that, became unhappy with what Seo Joo-Heon was going to do by punishing her. Seo Joo-Heon then opened an alcohol bottle in his hand and put Kara into the alcohol bottle. After that, Seo Joo-Heon shook the bottle very aggressively. There was a frighteningly satisfied look on his face as he shook the alcohol bottle containing Kara. Kara, who was weakened by alcohol, tried to scream, but it was useless. After that, several notification windows appeared informing if Kara was getting weaker now due to the effects of alcohol. Seo Joo-Heon smiled with satisfaction that this method worked well. According to the legend, humans defected to the sun god Ra, and in the end Ra sent Sekhmet to kill them, and when humans were almost extinct because of Sekhmet's cruelty, Ra made a large amount of red wine and Sekhmet, who thought that the red wine was human blood, drank it all and caused her to get drunk. Sekhmet transformed back into Hathor and humans were saved from extinction, and because of this, the Sekhmet relic became very weak to alcohol. Seo Joo-Heon smiled with satisfaction because the plan he used now worked when he used it in his previous life. Kara, who started to get drunk, was unable to do anything now. Yoo Ji-ha, who was still making a replica of the Van Gogh relic, which would be their main weapon now. A few moments later, Yoo Ji-ha has made the replica of the relic and he sees Seo Joo-Heon, who is asleep on the sofa at this time. With a little unacceptable, Yoo Ji-ha protests to Seo Joo-Heon, but Seo Joo-Heon just ignores him. There is a sound from the front door of their mansion now. Yoo Ji-ha panicked when he found out that Kira's subordinates had surrounded their house now, but all of this was part of Seo Joo-Heon's plan. He also let the aura of the relic come out and lure them in. Yoo Ji-ha didn't know why Seo Joo-Heon did all this, but Seo Joo-Heon did this because defeating Kara wasn't enough. They also had to deal with Kira's subordinates to keep watch so that the incident that killed the Holton family before wouldn't happen again. That's why Seo Joo-Heon lured them in by using Kara as bait. Right after that, the soldier managed to enter and surrounded Seo Joo-Heon along with Yoo Ji-ha there. The subordinate, Kara, asked the whereabouts of Kara, and Kara, who heard the voice of his subordinate from the alcohol bottle, knew that his subordinate came to save him. With a threat given by the soldier, Seo Joo-Heon faced him calmly while Kara seemed to rebel so that his subordinate saw him. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw Kara rebelling, immediately took the bottle and offered Kara subordinates to drink it. Suddenly Seo Joo-Heon threw the bottle of alcohol until the bottle hit the ground and broke, releasing all the contents. Kara subordinates, who saw that inside the bottle was just alcohol and ordinary worms, ignored it and continued to threaten Seo Joo-Heon to give Kara to them now. One of Kira's subordinates stepped on the worm and it made Kira scream in pain because of it. Meanwhile, the soldier who stepped on the worm felt strange because what he stepped on was hard unlike a normal worm. The notification window appeared again this time. The window informed that Kira's power was slowly weakening because his subordinate stepped on it. Meanwhile, Kira, who was stepped on by his subordinate, screamed in pain, and after Kira's control power completely disappeared. Seo Joo-Heon used the relic replica of Van Gogh and made all the soldiers who were there sucked into the painting along with Kira, who had changed back to her normal form. After that, only the sound of screaming from several soldiers who were sucked into the painting. After all the soldiers entered, they could only see Seo Joo-Heon from behind the painting. Meanwhile, with Kira, who was very angry now because of her subordinates who had stepped on her before, Kira's subordinates were very scared when they saw Kira, who became very angry at her. After that, only a few voices of Kira and her subordinates could be heard. Meanwhile, Kira and her subordinates tried to find a black spot so that they could get out of this painting. All her subordinates split up to find the black spot. Seo Joo-Heon and Yoo Ji-ha just looked at those who were looking for the black dot, and just as they found it, Yoo Ji-ha drew something that looked like a monster in the painting. As soon as the monster was drawn, Kira just looked at it with a surprised look because she saw the monster come to life in the painting. The monster chased Kira and her subordinates until they found the black dot and entered into it. But when they entered, they only moved to a dark room and could not get out. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw it, just smiled happily because his plan was successful. Kira just looked annoyed at Seo Joo-Heon, who asked Kira for something. After Seo Joo-Heon managed to make Kira and his subordinates tormented in the painting, Kira gave him a USB containing American soldiers and asked Seo Joo-Heon to release them all. But Seo Joo-Heon didn't release them and took the painting in his hand. Seo Joo-Heon just smiled happily as he managed to pull off his cunning trick on Kira and set the painting on fire. Kira, who was inside the painting, couldn't do anything and could only watch the painting slowly burn. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw the painting burning, said goodbye for the last time to Kira, and that was the end of Kira the War King. What will Seo Joo-Heon do after this? After the incident that happened to Kira and her subordinates, a news reported about the disappearance of Kira along with all her subordinates. It was said that the government had investigated, but everything ended in nothing. There was not a single trace left of Kira and her subordinates. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard the news, was still relaxing. Yoo Ji-ha, who saw Seo Joo-Heon, who was smiling happily, asked about it. Yoo Ji-ha also said that Seo Joo-Heon should relax more from work and enjoy the party held by the Holton family. Meanwhile, Irene's parents came to Seo Joo-Heon and thanked him for helping them recover from their illness. Seo Joo-Heon also accepted the thanks given politely. Irene's father also said that if Seo Joo-Heon needed something, then he should only tell the Holton family. Hearing that, Seo Joo-Heon also began to talk about business to them. Irene's father, who was interested, also asked more about the business referred to by Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon wanted to start a business by selling relics, one of which was an elixir plant. Not only that, Seo Joo-Heon then said that he also wanted to start a tea business because he had a tea plant that had a very good taste and smell. Seo Joo-Heon said that the number of relics obtained will increase because Seo Joo-Heon will continue to explore the tomb and take all the relics. He also said about Edward as his new manager. Seo Joo-Heon also started his offer with Irene's father, and Irene's father agreed to Seo Joo-Heon's request and would fund Seo Joo-Heon to start his business because the business plan owned by Seo Joo-Heon managed to make them interested. Irene's father asked about the name that Seo Joo-Heon would use for her business, But it seemed like Seo Joo-Heon hadn't really thought of a name for her business since she was just about to start it. And right after that, a voice from the crow caught all of their attention. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when she saw the arrival of the crow while she was relaxing. Shortly after the arrival of the crow, Irene was seen running in her swimwear trying to report that the relic was acting strangely, and she brought her bag to Seo Joo-Heon. And as Irene got closer to Seo Joo-Heon, she couldn't control her strength and screamed in pain. Irene fell down with her mother beside her trying to calm her down. After that, the crow started talking again, making Seo Joo-Heon draw his attention to the crow. Seo Joo-Heon knew that all this time Sia had been watched by the crow. Seo Joo-Heon also told the crow not to make trouble and asked them all to get into the ship. And when Irene's father asked about the crow, Seo Joo-Heon just replied casually that the crow was a stalker, after which Seo Joo-Heon faced the crow and asked what he wanted this time. The crow had seen Seo Joo-Heon all this time, and he thought that Seo Joo-Heon wanted to be a thief instead of a tomb raider. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard that, became upset because he was just doing whatever he wanted now. The crow gave him information if there were some relics targeting Seo Joo-Heon now. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard the same thing that the map relic told him before, just responded normally. He knew that the relics didn't like him because he was on the same side as the crow now. Another thing that made the relics dislike Seo Joo-Heon was because of her unruly nature that made the relics dislike her. Seo Joo-Heon, who knew that she was the target of many relics besides being on the side of the crow, also because of her arbitrary behavior. The crow also said that Seo Joo-Heon had been targeted by the major relics. The major relics were the leaders of the relics, and they were also the ones who had trapped the crow so that he had to be sealed because of it. The crow also asked to be careful because very strong spears would start appearing, and with the confidence that Seo Joo-Heon had, he was sure he could go through everything even though all the relics were targeting him. The crow flew back. He was happy that Seo Joo-Heon was not scared and still had high confidence. It was seen that the crow dropped something from the sky to give to Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw it, tried to ask the crow, and the relic only said that it would be a favor from him to Seo Joo-Heon. After that, Seo Joo-Heon only saw the crow, who slowly moved away from him. Seo Joo-Heon also tried to analyze the relic he got. It seemed that the relic was a relic that he could consume, but Seo Joo-Heon still didn't know what effect he would get if he ate it. After the crow left, Yoo Ji-ha and Irene came back and met Seo Joo-Heon and saw the item he got from the crow before. Yoo Ji-ha, who heard that there was a treasure inside the fruit relic, became very excited to open it. But Seo Joo-Heon said that if the item he got was Humbu's gourd, then he would get something good, but if he got Nolbu's gourd, then he would get a disaster. That's why Seo Joo-Heon intended to keep it and not open it here in case something bad happened. Seo Joo-Heon also glanced at Yoo Ji-ha, and it seemed that he understood what Seo Joo-Heon meant. Immediately after that, Yoo Ji-ha took out the relic Van Gogh from his pocket and sucked the fruit into the painting by using the power of the relic Van Gogh that he stole from Kara. After using the power of the relic, the huge relic fruit entered the painting. Yoo Ji-ha looked very happy that he could use the relic because it would be very easy for him to carry things now. And as soon as Seo Joo-Heon returned from the party, he built his company with the help of Edward, and he used the Hammurabi relic to make a contract with Edward so that he would not betray him. And one day, there was Irene, who came with a letter in her hand that seemed to be intended for Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon read the message. It seemed that there would be a party that invited all the excavation teams from all over the world. But the surprising thing was that the host of the event was Pandora, and the letter was made by CEO Kwon for Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon didn't want to come to the party because she didn't want to face anything troublesome, and she didn't know what Pandora was planning to do later. But Seo Joo-Heon, who read the list of invited names, was surprised when she found a name she knew very well there. Irene, who was confused, asked if Seo Joo-Heon had an acquaintance from the list of invited guests. Seo Joo-Heon remembers someone who is also a relic user, but it seems that the person with the name Julian Miller is someone who is very opposite to Seo Joo-Heon. After reading the name, Seo Joo-Heon changed his mind and will go to the party to meet someone named Julian Miller. Who is Julian Miller? Why does Seo Joo-Heon know that person? Several people in elegant clothes were seen attending a party accompanied by beautiful music. There was the sound of someone who was talking to a woman who was giving him information about Seo Joo-Heon, who was coming to the party this time. The man seemed to be smiling happily, and it turned out that he was the one who made the Holton family sick before. The man was planning something for Seo Joo-Heon, who would come to the party. At the mansion where the party was held, there was Edward, who only greeted Seo Joo-Heon, and Irene. Yoo Ji-ha became unhappy when he was not greeted by Edward. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw Edward, greeted him again, but not just greeting Seo Joo-Heon, also asked for information about Pandora. It seems that Pandora has planned to gather everyone who is part of the tomb excavation team and search for relics to this party. Seo Joo-Heon will probably get some job offers from some people there because he is quite famous now, and like what Edward said, some of the women there are also attracted by Seo Joo-Heon's good looks. After Seo Joo-Heon talked to Edward, he heard someone calling him, and when Seo Joo-Heon turned his head, he saw a man with blonde hair. The man then introduced himself, named Austin Rockefeller. In contrast to Seo Joo-Heon, who did not know him, it seemed that Yoo Ji-ha was quite familiar with someone named Austin. Austin was a talented actor, and he was also a famous musician. Seo Joo-Heon also thought that Austin was a famous person seen by several people who were interested in seeing him, but in contrast to Seo Joo-Heon, who felt there was something wrong with someone named Austin, that Austin extended his hand so that he could shake hands with Seo Joo-Heon, but instead of Seo Joo-Heon, who shook his hand, it was Yoo Ji-ha who asked for an autograph from Austin. Austin, who saw that, took out his pen. The pen used by Austin is a relic that can make the person whose name is written become his fan and become one of his followers. But suddenly, the paper held by Yoo Ji-ha and given the signature of Austin was torn by Yoo Ji-ha himself. Austin was certainly surprised to see Yoo Ji-ha, who suddenly tore the paper. Yoo Ji-ha also thought that this was the work of Seo Joo-Heon. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon was seen playing on his cell phone. By using the relic Shakespeare, Seo Joo-Heon made Yoo Ji-ha forcefully tear off the autograph of Austin from another Austin fan, and with one command given by Seo Joo-Heon through the relic, he managed to make Yoo Ji-ha tear off the autograph of another Austin. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon, who was near Austin, quickly took the relic pen that Austin had before making Austin certainly surprised by the relic that was taken away. Seo Joo-Heon also damaged the relic pen with his own hands and threatened Austin not to use the relic anymore. Edward, who was near Seo Joo-Heon, was also surprised when he found out that Austin was using the relic now. Seo Joo-Heon smiled with satisfaction when he managed to make Austin upset because he had damaged Austin's relic. Seo Joo-Heon also recalled the name Rockefeller. They were a rich family from America who had a wealth almost equal to the Holton family. The Rockefeller family is a family that provides assistance to relic users with their money. They can make relic users reach the level of king, and one example is Kara. but Seo Joo-Heon considers them as her enemies because they are on the side of Pandora. Seo Joo-Heon thought of stopping Austin now and destroying him, but he felt strange now because he remembered that there were no male relic users from the Rockefeller family now, and Seo Joo-Heon could also feel that Austin was hiding a relic with the god tier now. Austin became angry now and his emotions were a little uncontrollable. Austin was seen trying to take something out of his pocket, but the reporters who were there cheered happily because Austin was going to show them his relic. Austin was shocked to see the reporter cheering for him to use the relic, and began to ask Austin several questions related to the relic. Austin seemed to have made a mistake in attracting the reporter's attention. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw Austin panicking, mocked him by saying if Austin was afraid of the camera, it managed to make Austin annoyed at Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon also challenged Austin to tell the media with the relic he had, and with a lopsided smile, Seo Joo-Heon accused Austin of having done something suspicious with the relic he had, and provoked Austin's emotions to make him lose control of the relic because of his unstable emotions. Seo Joo-Heon's words managed to make one of the reporters there ask Austin the truth, but Austin tried to defend himself. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard Austin making a defense, again provoked the emotions of Austin by again giving taunts and insinuations to Austin. Shortly after that, a voice was heard from a host, but it seemed that Seo Joo-Heon knew the voice very well, and immediately he turned to see who was talking now. He saw Julian Miller in front there. Julian Miller used to be one of his colleagues when he worked for CEO Kwon in his previous life. Even Julian Miller became the left hand of CEO Kwon, with Seo Joo-Heon himself as the right hand of CEO Kwon. Julian Miller has the relic Zhujiang, which makes him able to get all the information from tombs and relics. Their team works with Julian as a provider of information and strategy, while Seo Joo-Heon is the one who will execute the plan, but their views are both different. Julian and Seo Joo-Heon are often involved in an argument because Seo Joo-Heon kills innocent people, but Seo Joo-Heon has no choice but to kill that person to save himself, and that is the thing that will continue to be an argument between the two of them. Julian is a very rigid and strict person, making Seo Joo-Heon always involved in arguments with him. Seo Joo-Heon recalled his past, and he would not deal with Julian again in his current life. Seo Joo-Heon no longer needed information using Zhujiang relic belonging to Julian, because he himself already knew everything that would happen for the next 15 years, and he also had help from the crow who was with him, and after successfully seeing his former partner there, Seo Joo-Heon left the party with Austin, who was still upset with Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon was convinced that CEO Kwon was at this party, and he didn't want Julian to fall into the hands of CEO Kwon and everyone from Pandora. Actually, Seo Joo-Heon didn't need Julian, but it would be very inconvenient later if Julian worked for someone else. Seo Joo-Heon also thought of a plan that he would do to make Julian not work for anyone. What will Seo Joo-Heon do to make Julian not work for anyone? The speech delivered by Julian has ended. Seo Joo-Heon immediately wanted to attract the attention of Julian, but it seems that he was a little late this time because CEO Kwon has been near Julian and talked to him. CEO Kwon praised the speech given by Julian, and he made his offer to work with TBM Group. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when he saw Julian, who had agreed to the offer given by CEO Kwon. It seems that this time Seo Joo-Heon was a little late. Seo Joo-Heon took out his cell phone and contacted Yoo Ji-ha and Edward to come to his place now. The two of them, who got the message from Seo Joo-Heon, immediately fulfilled Seo Joo-Heon's call. After saying goodbye to Irene, Yoo Ji-ha followed Edward to head in the direction Seo Joo-Heon was now. Several people there seemed to praise CEO Kwon and Richard, who donated his paintings. Meanwhile, Richard, who was praised so, became a little awkward when he was asked about the new work he would make in the future. Richard also tried to divert the topic about his new work and made an excuse if he was too busy to make a new work. Immediately, Seo Joo-Heon denied Richard's excuse. Seo Joo-Heon said if Richard could not draw and busy was just an excuse he made up. Richard was surprised to see Yoo Ji-ha, Edward, and Seo Joo-Heon nearby. Seo Joo-Heon still denied Richard's excuse about Pandora, and it managed to make Julian become suspicious of Richard. Now, seeing Julian, who was suspicious of Seo Joo-Heon, took this opportunity to defame Richard by saying that Richard only made replicas of other people's works. The reporters also began to believe the rumors said by Seo Joo-Heon. Richard, who saw that they started to believe the rumors, tried to find his defense, but Yoo Ji-ha suddenly shouted and asked Richard to prove that Richard did not just replicate other people's works and told him to make new works. Richard, who heard that, was even more angry. Yoo Ji-ha scolded Richard and accused him of stealing his work. The quarrel made all the reporters there interested and quickly took photos and videos of the quarrel between the two of them. Richard also gave threats to Yoo Ji-ha, who had made his good name fall in front of the reporters. It was seen that the reporters were taking a lot of videos and photos of the two of them fighting. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon asked Julian not to interfere in this matter. Julian also agreed with Seo Joo-Heon, who saw the two of them fighting just like that even though they were at the party. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon, who saw CEO Kwon doing nothing, began to spread another rumor about CEO Kwon using his relic to make others submit to him, and instigated Julian if it was possible that Julian had become one of the victims of CEO Kwon, who forced Julian with his relic to make Julian sign the contract given. Julian, who heard the words of Seo Joo-Heon, began to rethink if he felt a strong aura coming from CEO Kwon. Seo Joo-Heon saw CEO Kwon, who was getting frustrated because he was the target of Julian's suspicions. CEO Kwon also pointed to Edward and asked him to prove if CEO Kwon was not using the relic now. But Edward just looked away and acted stupidly, making CEO Kwon angry at him. CEO Kwon began to threaten Edward if he would cancel his cooperation, and Edward became angry because CEO Kwon had ignored him first. It then invited several reporters to cover their quarrel. Meanwhile, CEO Kwon's subordinates tried to persuade Julian, but it seems that Julian, who already did not trust them, canceled the contract that CEO Kwon made with him some time ago. CEO Kwon and his subordinates, who heard that Julian canceled the contract, became angry with him. Julian just left the two of them and slightly glanced at Seo Joo-Heon. He could feel that Seo Joo-Heon had great strength and began to analyze the aura around Seo Joo-Heon. Julian just left to leave the party. Seo Joo-Heon again provoked the emotions of CEO Kwon, who had lost one of his people. CEO Kwon, who was really angry, now released his aura, and it made the building collapse instantly because of his power. Seo Joo-Heon was a little surprised to see CEO Kwon, who was so angry now, and released his power. The subordinates of CEO Kwon tried to calm CEO Kwon, who had used his relic, but CEO Kwon, who was already emotionally ignited, ignored his subordinates. Seo Joo-Heon, who managed to make CEO Kwon angry, smiled happily and challenged CEO Kwon, but before CEO Kwon unleashed his power, Austin stopped him and asked to hand over Seo Joo-Heon to him. Austin tried to stop CEO Kwon from using his power here because it would only bring losses on their side, and Austin also said that he had challenged Seo Joo-Heon before. With that, CEO Kwon calmed himself down, and now we see Austin facing Seo Joo-Heon. Austin took out a relic from under his suit. Seo Joo-Heon now knows the relic used by Austin now. Zoroaster's Avesta, a relic used by the King of Propagation in his previous life. The King of Propagation is one of the 4th-ranked king. He is on the same level as CEO Kwon and Kara. He rules over several people using the power of the religious relic he holds. His followers give him power, wealth, even some are willing to become his soldiers. Seo Joo-Heon thought of a plan in his head to face Austin. At this time, he was sure that the future had changed because Austin had this relic. Austin also used his power to tell his followers to attack Seo Joo-Heon. Several people who had been controlled by Austin saw their eyes turn purple with a light shining from him. A notification window appeared saying that the followers of Austin were getting stronger and stronger. And Seo Joo-Heon, who was also under attack from the people who had been controlled by Austin, using his relic now. Seo Joo-Heon was a little troubled to deal with a relic with this type of religion that could control others. Seo Joo-Heon also saw that Yoo-Heon was starting to be controlled by Austin with his relic. Austin was becoming very confident in his power because he could control others easily and make them do what he told them to do. Seo Joo-Heon, who felt himself a little affected by Austin's relic, he hit Yoo-Heon very hard and made him wake up from Austin's influence. It was seen that Yoo-Heon began to wake up from the influence and was complaining in pain because Seo Joo-Heon had hit him just like that. Seo Joo-Heon also took out his sword relic and tried to avenge what was done by Austin, who controlled other people's minds. Will Seo Joo-Heon be able to defeat Austin? Seo Joo-Heon drew his sword preparing to fight those who had been controlled by Austin before. Edward, who saw that Seo Joo-Heon took out his sword, was a little panicked if Seo Joo-Heon was going to kill the person controlled by Austin. But Seo Joo-Heon ignored Edward's words and ran forward past several people towards the target of his attack, which was Austin. Austin could only be surprised when he saw Seo Joo-Heon had run towards him and quickly slashed him using the sword. Visible blood splashes from Seo Joo-Heon's slash marks on Austin's neck. Austin screamed loudly, thinking that his neck had been slashed, but when he checked again, his neck looked fine. There was not the slightest wound there. Seeing Austin, who panicked because he felt that his neck had been slashed, Seo Joo-Heon laughed and was seen releasing a blue aura from his body. Austin, who felt he had been fooled by Seo Joo-Heon, became angry with him. Seo Joo-Heon accepted Austin's anger with a smile and pointed to other people who experienced the same thing as Austin felt. Seo Joo-Heon, who had taken Austin's relic in his hand, made Austin even more angry, and Austin became a little nauseous when Seo Joo-Heon took the relic from his hand. But when Seo Joo-Heon wanted to use the relic, a notification window appeared if Seo Joo-Heon needed to weaken the control possessed by Austin first if he wanted to use Austin's relic. Seo Joo-Heon looked at Austin, who had just vomited his guts. Austin quickly summoned back his relic, but Seo Joo-Heon, who was faster, used his rope relic to bind Austin's neck. It was seen that Austin's control over his own relic was getting weaker because of the aura done by the rope relic. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, smiled happily and made the rope relic to choke Austin's neck more tightly. Meanwhile, Austin's relic began to make a sound when the relic felt that Austin's strength was getting weaker, and with Austin's control for the relic getting weaker, finally the relic broke its bond with Austin. Seeing that, Seo Joo-Heon used his strength to conquer the relic. Seo Joo-Heon, who felt his strength increasing during this time, felt happy because he could now use his strength to dominate relics with high tiers, because he used to have great difficulty conquering the Muramasa relic, which was only tier A. But now, he was different. The relic began to hurt because of Seo Joo-Heon, who continued to use his strength. Meanwhile, Austin could only see what Seo Joo-Heon was doing to his relic. Austin tried to use his dominance to make the rope relic obey him, and as soon as Austin used his power, the rope relic became silent instantly, but instead of obeying Austin, the rope relic returned to strangle him. Seeing Austin who was in trouble, one of Austin's subordinates without hesitation cut Seo Joo-Heon's rope relic to make him have to return to Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon was upset because Austin's subordinate damaged his relic, but Austin did not accept and said that if Seo Joo-Heon started destroying his relic, Seo Joo-Heon chose to leave because his business here was over and he had gotten the relic he wanted from Austin. Austin ordered his subordinate named Bella to stop Seo Joo-Heon, but as soon as Bella approached Seo Joo-Heon threw something that looked like a gas in a glass bottle. As soon as the bottle hit Bella, thick smoke soared up covering the vision of Bella and made her have to stop her steps to chase Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon also met his friends and invited them to leave this party immediately. Seo Joo-Heon intended to find Irene before she met Miller, who had not left the party. Seo Joo-Heon invited Miller to go with her, but Miller did not seem to trust Seo Joo-Heon completely. Seo Joo-Heon was trying to persuade Miller now and make him go with him. Miller was confused because Seo Joo-Heon suddenly helped him even they just met a moment ago, but Seo Joo-Heon just smiled and said if the two of them had another bond before. Yoo Ji-ha was still painting something on the ground. Miller just looked, and he was a little unsure if they could all escape by using the painting that Yoo Ji-ha was drawing now. Seo Joo-Heon suddenly asked about Miller's sister. Miller was surprised when Seo Joo-Heon knew about his sister, but Seo Joo-Heon said that he only saw her from the news on TV, and he also intended to help Miller to find his sister. Miller also refused the offer from Seo Joo-Heon because he had found his sister and she died right in front of him. Seo Joo-Heon's shock had to stop when Yoo Ji-ha called them because his painting was finished. Seo Joo-Heon still did not know what happened and why Miller's sister had died. Seo Joo-Heon was a little distrustful of Miller because he believed that Miller's sister was still alive, but now Seo Joo-Heon's plans failed because he failed to make an offer with Miller. A white statue was seen which gave off a golden glow. Shortly after that, Seo Joo-Heon and his friends appeared right in front of the statue. As soon as they all managed to move, Miller withdrew himself immediately, and that made Seo Joo-Heon a little upset. Seo Joo-Heon could only watch him leave and answer Yoo Ji-ha's question about him knowing Miller with an ambiguous answer. What will Seo Joo-Heon do next? And is Miller's sister really dead? Has the future changed again?